It's long hours. It's akin to a very busy news day otherwise, but it's kind of every day. There's always going to be stories that you don't get to, which
Um,
happens in most beats, but even more so now where it's like, oh well, we couldn't get to report on any number of things that we could have and should have focused on. But it's very clear what the news is. No one is really sitting around thinking, well, what's really the lead here? We know that, like today, they're opening up the care centers at the BCEC in South Boston. That was, not only was it the governor's main messaging from the press conference today, it was the news. Sometimes there have been things what the governor has been trying to push that might be the third or fourth story reported, and not necessarily you know the main one. And I think that the governor and his people get that, but you know it's there's work ahead of you, and you just have to go and do it. None of it is too uh academically difficult, I'll put it that way, because we know what it is, and I know how to report it, and I know how to get it on the air. That's just what the job is.
right. Okay. Do you feel that a lot of stories are, slipping through the cracks that really shouldn't be? I know we've kind of been seeing that at the Globe where I work as well. You know,
Hmm.
a lot of stories that would normally be doing really, really well are sort of getting pushed to the bottom of the page.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are many things that I'm personally just putting a pin in to return to later. When it comes to how the administration is handling this, what is going on, stories like the Holyoke Soldiers Home, things that are happening in Chelsea, really anything going on at nursing homes, these funding systems that are being put in place, who's overseeing the funding systems that are being put in place, grant programs, loan programs. There's so many different things that are going on right now where there's just very little journalistic oversight, for lack of a better word, happening. But then the other side of that is there's no time and space for human interest features or all that kind of thing, at least not in my beat. Like I said, I know what the work is that's in front of me. I'm never going to be able to do all of it, so I'm just going to kind of plow forward and do as much as I can, before I knock off from exhaustion. um, so I think that the real test will be finding out, keeping track of who said what when, who knew what when, what decisions were made, and hopefully doing that kind of accountability journalism retrospectively. It's unfortunate that we're in a situation where it has to be retrospective, but that takes good notes and coming back to it and making sure I remember to look into things and asking people as we go, is this right? Is this wrong? I think a lot of this stuff's happening in real time. A lot of the nursing home things, a lot of how the municipalities are dealing with the state. I get messages during these press conferences from lawmakers and municipal officials and all sorts of folks about, well, what he just said isn't necessarily 100% accurate, or that hasn't been our experience. That's kind of a more frequent message that I get from people. I wish I could blow that out into a big enterprise piece, but I'm not going to have time to. It's the next press conference, the next thing to go to. But maybe there's some enterprise reporting down the road that I can do a fuller job of once things have calmed down.
Have you found that a lot of stories that you might not have thought about have sort of been exposed by this crisis?
Somewhat, the Holyoke Soldiers Home situation is definitely something that hit big, and not only was it a huge story in and of itself of the failure of a state institution, state-run facility, but it also showed it was a symptom, for lack of a better term, no pun intended, of kind of what a lot of nursing facilities are going through. It became an example of one of the harder issues that things are going through, and unfortunately, that's what we're seeing more of right now. We're going to see spikes in deaths. We're going to see situations in certain places, like Chelsea, the city of Chelsea right now being a hotspot of the outbreak. There's going to be examples of where it's worse, and that's going to be news, one way or the other.
All right. Have you found that it's harder to track officials down during this time? Do you find it difficult to get in touch with some of your contacts at the State House? right now?
Yeah, it has been. In some ways, electronic email, electronic connections and email and things are easier because they're there all the time. A lot of time lawmakers won't check their email, for a few hours or whatever. It's different person to person, or their staff won't be there. When you take a lot of that out of the equation, and people are in front of their computers all day, they do kind of get back to you. But there hasn't been all that much need to contact a lot of rank and file lawmakers.
Yeah.
They are voting and they are meeting, but pretty much everything is even more top down and centralized than it has been before. I was actually speaking with a lawmaker the other day about decisions being made in a video caucus. It was basically a lot of people together in a situation like this, and they did come to some kind of consensus, and then leadership moved that version of the bill forward, and that made a lot of sense. And the lawmaker was saying, well, that's like how we usually do it. And I'm saying, yes, but you're just not doing it in public anymore.
Yeah.
That debate that used to happen on the floor, as rare as it was, and I don't want to say that the Massachusetts State House is where democracy lives and breathes in the floor of the chambers. It all the decisions get made beforehand, and then they just kind of march out the bills. But now even those bills are getting written, and the input of those other elected officials is now happening in private Zoom conversations, instead of behind closed doors. So I think it really is just a greater example of leadership centralizing power and going with it because it needs to be. It's an emergency. You can't expect the kind of robust debate on every single issue that is coming up on an emergency basis. So I'd say that yeah, they're on these damn Zoom calls as much as anybody else.
Yep, I believe it. Sort of related to that, have you found that there's been sort of a lack of transparency through this process, maybe both from Baker's office and in the State House in general, or not really, or maybe it's just necessary?
I would say that whatever lack of transparency there is, it's drowned out by how much new data is coming at us all the time. There's always new news. There's always so much. A lot of the spokespeople for these departments and agencies are extremely overtaxed. So yeah, it's challenging to get answers to your questions sometimes.
Yeah.
I would say that the amount of data that is coming out now, especially as of yesterday with race and ethnicity being on there, they've been transparent about the change in policy, but
Mhm.
they've also been, I would say, fairly transparent, explaining why they didn't really have it up until now. Now they've made it mandatory to put it on the forms. So they've, I at least now understand that it wasn't a mandatory thing to put on these forms, so that data wasn't being collected. You can call that in of itself a failure, and it should have been mandatory from day one, but it wasn't. So at least their explanation is there for that kind of thing. There's so many new programs and things coming online. There's far and away enough to cover. But you're probably right. There is a lack of transparency, but no one has time to stop and insist on transparency in an emergency situation like this.
Okay. Do you find that people have been more cautious about speaking with you just because the process is more centralized now? Or maybe that hasn't been a problem because everything.
Well, there hasn't. I haven't done that much reporting other than what you see. It's
Mhm.
these public press conferences. It is a day's work basically to prepare for, and then go and cover, and then write up and broadcast the day's events, so to speak. Um, you will work in other points of view as much as you can, but for coverage like this, when it's really just the governor said A, B, D, and C, we put that out there. There are other stories that are connecting to it, and at WGBH, a lot of my colleagues are doing great work, breaking off some of those issues, focusing on schools, focusing on nursing homes, focusing on testing, focusing on record keeping, focusing on morgues, and things like that. Whereas I'm moving ahead like a shark and going to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, along with the governor. So I can't really tell you because practically all of the information I've been dealing with has been coming out of that malt box in the back of the room at the press conference. Everything has been webcast. Every question and answer has been completely known to everybody, at least in my experience here. When things do come down, when I start getting back to writing longer stories about more involved things, then we will hopefully see hopefully I'll have the luxury of facing tougher tougher transparency problems than one I have now.
Do you think this is gonna change anything for the future after, everything's kinda settled down? Do you think we're gonna maybe see more transparency, different ways of getting in touch with officials, anything like that?
It could be. I think just society in general is probably going to have a new relationship with working from home and connecting electronically, which is probably pretty good. E-health is definitely something that the legislature's been trying to tackle for about a decade now and hasn't really you know made much progress in legalizing it. That's like kind of a policy debate that's been raging for a long time. That's now, because of these emergency orders, become a very valuable tool for healthcare workers to meet with people virtually to diagnose all sorts of other things so that we're not clogging up hospitals and clinics and things like that. But society is going to shift in so many different ways. Our ideas about education are going to shift, and e-learning and everything's going to shift. So what that means for government, I don't know. I think that would be a great question to ask some lawmakers in 6 months and say, when you're running for re-election, how did that change? How are you connecting with constituents? How are constituents making themselves known to you? And then ask their constituents, if the new standard is a Zoom town hall every week to hear from constituents, that's going to be kind of profound for a lot of these guys.
I actually had a similar question for you, which is,
Mhm.
have you been looking for ways to sort of making sure you're answering the questions that your listeners are asking?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I've been in touch with an awful lot of lawmakers. One thing that I had some success with early on was producing my own webcast of these press conferences before the governor's office kind of upgraded their gear. And the pool, the TV station pool, now offers a pretty well shared live stream of all of these press conferences. But for the first handful, I was the only one with a reliable, connection.
Right.
And so I got a lot of people, and because, it sounds kind of a little old fashioned now, but because I've been on Facebook for 10 plus years with all of these lawmakers, and they are now in that chat corner, that chat room, telling me, "Oh, ask this." I'm getting private messages from them and DMs on Twitter when I tweet it out. So the social sphere of Beacon Hill is very active with this, and people are saying, well, this is, like I said, those municipal officials who say that hasn't really been our experience and things like that. So it's been good. As far as general listeners on the radio, less so. I know the station's been doing a pretty good job with things like that. We have a show, actually dedicated show at 7 p.m. It's on right now. Called in it together, that comes on after All Things Considered, that is just like, it's a kind of a call-in show. They have experts on. Our reporters go on there and do kind of two-way interviews with the host about issues that they're working on, and it's just dedicated to this issue. And I think we're hearing from a lot of people from there and fielding questions from the public and from the audience through that forum as well.
Okay, I actually had a question from one of the audience members, and they asked you, how did you decide about doing Facebook Live as a sort of a medium?
The app on Android treats audio devices better than the Twitter app does. That's why. There's really no. It was easiest. Well, the real answer is have been a multimedia journalist my whole career, but I just don't have the personal bandwidth, again, no pun intended, to handle a full setup. So it was just like, all right, I'm just going to do this, throw the phone down. Where do I have the most followers that would be, interested in this, and which app is easiest? And that's that's Facebook. Facebook Live is, everyone knows how that works.
Mhm.
And then, to take the next step to get that feed into Twitter, into Periscope, into Instagram, into wherever else, get it on YouTube is just more than I want to commit to doing right now when I know the Facebook thing is working out pretty okay. And like I said, now that the governor's own press conference and that pool camera system is set up, my viewership has just completely gone down the toilet. So I don't really necessarily need to dedicate too much time and effort to that. One of the things that was kind of funny is that whenever there'd be a problem with the audio, there's nothing I can do about it once it's going. I can't like get out of my seat and stop taking notes and stop being a reporter so I can walk back and be the tech guy and troubleshoot this. So that's why I don't really want to make any promises when it comes to multimedia, because a battery is going to die and I'm not going to be there to replace it.
Yep.
So tough luck,
Actually, so let me just make a administrative point, which is if anyone who has sent me questions, why don't you actually send it to SPJ leaders, just so, and then he can feed me those questions, just because I think it would be a little easier that way for me. Okay, so next question. So have you found that there's been any difference in the way that people, at least in your experience, people are kind of consuming media? Or their perceptions about it, maybe?
Yeah, one thing that I'm interested in is what, for my personal um, occupation, I guess, is if the radio listeners' habits have changed. If someone was listening to Morning Edition at 7:30 a.m. with their coffee,
Yeah.
and then maybe listening to it at 8:30 a.m. in the car before they got to work at 9, are they now listening to it at 8:30 with their coffee because they have a Zoom meeting at 9? And then is the radio going on at 9:30 again after that meeting? So are people's listening habits in the morning especially completely different because we don't have that morning commute? I think, radio is the bread and butter is still on those car radios. The FM radio installed in every automobile is what keeps public radio alive. I love smart technology and web streaming and everything, but it's not really that big a fraction. It's growing, certainly, the way web interfacing with news is growing in every medium, but we need those car radios, we need those alarm clocks, and we need those kitchen radios still. And I am curious if maybe people are listening longer in the morning throughout the day, and that means a ton. It means that it's no longer your 6 a.m., 7 a.m. newscasts that are the big ones. It's your 8 a.m. and your 9 a.m. newscasts that are the most listened to. And I don't think we know that yet because I don't know how fast the ratings kind of adjust to things like this. So we could have a completely different audience, very topsy-turvy kind of situation. And that's just in radio. And I'm sure, web traffic, I'm sure the web traffic stats have been wacky as hell, the last 3 weeks. It's no longer those, people checking the news sites at 8:45 or whenever they roll in, and then the lunch break traffic spike and all that. I'm sure it's all over the damn place, and it's probably more consistent throughout the day. People are checking in on things. So yeah, taking an analytical look at that type of stuff across all the media would be kind of fascinating, I think.
I think so too. Do you know if WGBH is planning on doing anything like that once the ratings start to come in?
No idea. I mean, ratings are kind of proprietary anyway. I think Nielsen will release some of them. I don't know, and I don't want to speak for the powers that be there. I'm as far away from decisions having to do with ratings than anyone, but I would definitely advocate for media critics and journalism folks to survey the stations, ask them what they saw during this period.
Right. Okay. Um, do you know if people are happy with the amount of information coming out of the State House and Baker's office? Are they content, or do they feel like they're still sort of in the dark?
I think they're very happy with him. I would again like to see some polling on Baker himself, how that's gone. I think that I'm hearing from more and more people, really nationally, the tone seems to be, thank God for governors in a lot of ways. And a lot of these governors and in our case, the mayor in Boston, have become counterpoints to what's going on federally. Those first few big press conferences where people were kind of reckoning with the reality of all of this, everyone was glued to it. And I think that, Charlie Baker's name recognition is probably sky high right now.
Yeah.
And people generally like, I can't put any poll data to support this, but anecdotally from what I've heard, talking to friends and family and cab drivers and stuff, people like that he's doing it daily. One major recurring complaint I've been seeing is that he doesn't do it at the same time every day. That really is the number one complaint of Charlie Baker that I have seen throughout this whole thing, is people saying, why does he do it at 1 p.m. some days and 3 p.m. the other days? And that's, it's a pretty good complaint to have, if you're, from the governor's position. I think that there is a desire for more data on the local level. One major complaint is that the state has only issued things by the information from DPH county by county. And if you know Massachusetts, the counties are ancient and wacky, and they don't really line up with any particular cultural regions that we have anymore. To say that there's so many cases in Middlesex County doesn't tell you a whole hell of a lot, because it
No.
could be Cambridge, it could be Lowell, for Christ's sake, so a lot of folks are saying, why don't you give us the town by town data? One thing that has been an interesting story that, again, if I had time and the ability to do any kind of phone calling and enterprise work, the state says that every municipal Department of Public Health has the authority to release that municipality's data free and clear to whoever they want. And that just isn't really happening. And people are saying that they're actually discouraged, not prohibited, but discouraged from doing that. They don't want to create panic situations. They don't want to, say where there are hot spots, when other towns who aren't releasing the data might be just as hot, but you don't know it. So there's some methodology behind it there, but the county system is a little weak for people. It's just not nearly as drilled down as folks are used to with data in the in the information age.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've also heard a lot of that too, and a lot of questions about, every time we get data about a person in their 70s in Middlesex County died, people want to know.
Exactly. Yep.
What,
Yeah. Where is that? And
Mhm.
the race and ethnicity data now being presented is going to be there, but now what people might jump to conclusions based on that, which is going to be probably a detriment to the public's understanding, of where things are. If where things are in communities of color, where in ethnic neighborhoods in general, there's a cloudy area there if you're trying to put two and two together with these county statistics.
Have you, so there's, what was I going to say? I was thinking about, ratings for Baker and his own. I've kind of been wondering if you think he might start to um, criticize the federal government a little bit more. He's been a little bit
Hmm.
quiet on that topic,
Yeah.
uh,
uh
for
he's
obvious reasons. Yeah.
yeah it, he has been airing his frustration more than he has in the past. I think this is the most openly frustrated I've ever seen Governor Baker when it comes to the federal government. For the longest time, I think the governor saw that there was more than enough criticism of the president to go around in the Massachusetts delegation, and not nearly enough ability to make a phone call and contact someone. And I think that in a situation like this, the worst case scenario for Baker would be getting cut off. When the vice president is instructed not to return your phone calls, to not, and I know I've never talked to the president on the phone, and I've never dealt with him one-on-one, or I've never dealt with him as one of 50, the way the governor has. But I think that in his mind, if open criticism to scratch that itch
Mhm.
means you get half as many ventilators sent to the state, that's not worth it.
Yeah.
He's been that way with funding for a long time. what is open criticism from a Republican going to do to what we get from the federal government.
Okay.
So that's the situation he's in. It's kind of an expanded version of that situation now. So when he does criticize the feds, he has been criticizing, the protective gear stockpile. Today, he was very, very critical about the bill that Congress passed, this $2 trillion bill. It expands unemployment insurance options for a lot of folks, but they didn't offer any guidance about how to legally distribute this until yesterday or today. And now the state is very quickly putting that into order and trying to get that money out there ASAP. And so, Baker's up there saying, we did everything we could as fast as we could, but we just had to wait on the feds. And I wish it wasn't the case, but it is the case.
Yeah. Have you heard anything about him being more critical behind the scenes? Other gripes among other people in the state house?
Um, I think it's clear based on what's public. I don't think you need to go behind the scenes. I have not heard that he's blowing up at Mike Pence, on private phone calls, anything like that. I think that what you see is what you get in a lot of ways with Baker. For the reasons that I already stated, a private blow up, maybe it's a more impassioned plea privately, something like that. I think he's trying to get the data. He talks a lot about how they're trading data with the feds to prove that Massachusetts needs this many ventilators, this many masks, this many whatever. So that's something that he's been up to. But no, I under normal circumstances, I would have had those conversations with people. I haven't, so I can't really tell you the behind the scenes all that much because the in front of the scenes has been a whirlwind for 3 weeks.
Yep. So let me see. I'm seeing that there was a drop in audio. Oh, I guess it's fixed now. I did not perceive any drop in audio from you, but
Oh, okay.
one from some of our listeners. And let's see. I have a question from someone, and it says, I'm not sure if this is a real question or not. It says, is the governor wearing a mask when not on camera?
He's not. I have not seen the governor in a mask just yet.
Yeah. He has
So
very impassioned, though. You're right. He seemed almost like he was going to cry when the Patriots plane came in from the press.
Yeah, that was a moment. He is friends with Jonathan Kraft. I think that's what facilitated that connection to begin with. That he was on the phone with him, and he has his moments. One thing that's been interesting is that now a lot of people are watching these press conferences and they are exposed to Baker in a way that they haven't been. He's been governor for 5+ years, but it's only just now people are tuning in every day and getting a sense of him as a personality. And one thing that has kind of been funny is that people are interpreting his tone in ways that I just didn't anticipate and I don't get. Like, I feel like I kind of know what the guy means. I don't misinterpret his tone all that often. His people will reach out, when I do,
Yeah.
or if I mischaracterize something, and I get that right, and try to correct the record and things like that. And I've been covering him since before the 2010 race, so it's been 11 years with the guy. But I was fascinated where people would say, oh, he sounded pissed today. Oh, he sounded emotional today. And I'm like, he sounded normal today. He gets fired up. And when he gets fired up, it can sound like he's pissed off. And I can see that part. And then people say, oh, he sounded really emotional. I'm like, oh, really? I don't know. He's the kind of guy where his prepared remarks that he makes, especially if he's giving a speech, are not great. he's not, he doesn't have the oratorical skills of some other politicians. But when you get him to answer questions and you go back and forth and he's speaking off the cuff, is far better. I tell his people all the time, I don't think I've really ever used a quote in a radio story from his prepared remarks. I'll do it in print, do it on the web.
Mhm.
But when it comes to getting that soundbite, that, pithy statement where he says what he means,
Right.
and he says it with the tone you need. It can be the perfect soundbite. If the tone doesn't match and it's monotone, I'm not going to put it on the radio. It's not worth it. But I am just saying, everything I use on the radio, I take from the Q&A. And sometimes that's me asking an obvious question to get the obvious answer, because I'm baiting to get that soundbite, which is an unfortunate part of broadcast journalism. But it's necessary. And actually, one of my mentors, someone who was around in the press room of the State House for a very, very long time, Kevin McNicholas, would somehow always ask the question near the end of the press availability that every reporter led with. It was the lead quote in every one story, and
That's so
Kevin just had a way of asking it. So these guys can come out with a stack of 8 minutes and pages of prepared remarks, and it's going to be like the well-placed question that results in the quote that gets into the news. And that is some kind of weird journalism alchemy that I don't really understand just yet. I'm still working on that.
all right. Let's see what kind of other questions we have from people here. Just want to check around, make sure I'm not missing any. All right. If I'm missing any, please someone let me know. But I think we're good on that, so I'll just return to some of my questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, were there any stories that you had to put down, right before this all sort of kicked off
Oh,
that
so many. Yeah, I don't even remember them anymore. Yeah, I actually, I snoozed a bunch of emails on another story I was working on, and they just kind of came back, and I was like, yeah, right. That's it. It just seems so piddly now and insignificant compared to what's going on. The regular routine of getting the state budget done and all of that legislative stuff. The entire legislative agenda at the State House has basically been put on hold, if not thrown out the window. The only way they're going to get anything major done this summer, this fall, is if they extend their session, which there's no guarantee they're going to do. So it's kind of like be back then. So yeah, it's partially because of all the new work. Like I have to, like I said, that's my daily schedule is these press conferences. It's a day's work just to handle all that. But the other side of that is just the scope of what we're dealing with. What was the B-level story that I was working on here or there while delivering my daily stories is now like a M-level story compared to what we're dealing with. So, when it takes, you might have some good scoops and some good, under normal circumstances, some good stories, but they don't really amount to much in an emergency like this.
even, national election stories right now have kind of, you know,
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I got a text message said Bernie Sanders dropped out of the Democratic race and the race is over. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's good to know.
yeah.
Moving on, and I was like, that's the culmination of this process that was dominating the news for the entire year
Yeah.
prior to this happening. So yeah, we are in a massively historic moment right now, and that's where the reporting resources need to be.
Let's see. I have another question from the field, and it is, have you or any of your colleagues been concerned with being out in the field right now? I mean, I'm sure it sounds like WGBH is concerned about you, which is
Yeah, well, I'm concerned about me. We're all concerned. Yeah, definitely. I think most everyone is working from home. So that's one thing. I've kind of been operating under the assumption that, I got it a week ago and we'll wake up with a cough tomorrow. So really a lot of that is about, prevention of spread, which is what we all should be doing. But,
Mhm.
if my job means I have to get into that building as safely as I can and be around the same people as safely as I can, those precautions are being taken. It's an awful lot of hand washing, an awful lot of, sanitizer, an awful lot of wipes
Right.
on everything I touch and all that. But yeah, every morning I wake up and I take a deep breath, and if I don't cough, it's a miracle.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing to do right now. Just assume that you have it, not to spread it.
Yeah, yeah, and even if I'm like an asymptomatic carrier, I think that's probably the best. Assume that you are spreading it and you're asymptomatic. Good for you, but don't get anybody else sick. There's
Right.
no way to know that. Well, you can get tested, but there's no availability for tests for asymptomatic people.
Nope. Um, is there any silver lining that you've seen so far coming out of this situation? Anything happy that you would like to talk about?
um,
Yeah.
e-health is on the board. That's something. We're going to be looking at our technological infrastructure in different ways. I'm surprised there haven't been more internet outages, things like that. So our complete dedication to the internet is now complete. What else is positive? I think we'll be ready for the next pandemic. I hope,
Yeah, me too.
because we'll be able to go into shutdown mode should this ever happen again, and it might happen again. So that's at least somewhat helpful, and it's gonna reshape so much of human existence. I mean, it's kind of in a way, it's the first major global event that everyone is doing, that all of humanity is doing the same thing at once. And that's going to have profound effects. And I am not qualified to talk to you about what that may be.
It's a little comforting that everyone's in the same boat, all of
Yeah, a
yeah.
little, a little bit. Yeah. I'll think of some positive things later on.
Okay. In the meantime, we have another question from the audience, and that is the state taking the temperature of people, of media folks as they come into the press rooms?
No, they are not. And I've been asked that before. They're pretty hands off. We haven't really had any check-ins or anything like that. Our meetings are in the biggest auditorium in the State House, so we're not really coming in contact with anyone but ourselves. So some reporters are taking it more seriously than others, but I think at this point, most of the reporters are well, I'd say maybe a good third of the reporters are in masks. I'm just trying to think of today, and keeping their distance from each other, which it could be better. But as far as what the authorities are doing when we come and go, it's not. There's nothing to speak of.
Okay, that's kind of interesting.
I don't know who would do that. I don't know if we could
Yeah.
spare public health people to be there with a thermometer, or do you want like an untrained person, like building security, to do it? I don't know. I don't know if that's worth it, but it's not happening either way.
Here's another question: are people in those rooms where the meetings are happening? Are they interactions a little different these days? Are they strange? Are they acting different?
Um, I'd say we're used to different tones. Sometimes you're covering a murder, sometimes you're covering a tragedy, sometimes you're covering a celebration. So to shift with those tones within the press corps itself is not new. Uh, because it's become routine and we are kind of seeing the same people over and over again. It's not just the State House press corps that is there every day, but it's kind of usually the same TV people who are showing up as well now too. So we're getting in like, hey, how you doing, kind of a thing, and we
Yeah.
stay away from each other. But we're having conversations across the room. Our We have not become so somber that we're no longer socializing with each other. So I would say we're all very tired and we're all in like crisis coverage mode. I'll put it that way. But I don't think that is unprecedented.
If anything, they might be more interested in talking to other people right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's not too much human interaction going on. So when we are up in that press gallery, it's pretty good. And I'm like, oh, hey, who are you doing? I'm like having casual conversations with people as I'm wiping down the doorknobs and the
Right.
microwave and the coffee maker.
Someone other than my immediate family to talk to.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's see. Um, has WGBH been working with you and others to sort of keep you healthy, besides, just making sure you're not taking lifts or the tea or places where you might get sick?
Yeah, I mean, they've been voicing concern. I don't want to, get too into the details of everything. They've been very concerned about what my routine is, and identifying what some of the, the riskier aspects of me doing my job are, and addressing that, and they're sending me supplies. And so GBH has been absolutely fantastic, as far as keeping me protected and keeping me healthy while still having the advantage of having a reporter in these press conferences. And we've certainly talked about what that advantage means. Is it worth putting somebody up? And I'm certainly still willing to do it.
Yeah.
So we are going through that. And yeah, I would say pretty much the management of all of the press organizations that are active in this have been treating it very responsibly.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Good to know. Is there anything, this was another question from some of our board members, is there anything that you feel less comfortable asking now on the spot, now that it's sort of crisis mode?
And yeah, I mean, anything off topic, not anything off topic, but a lot of things that just don't seem important right now. Like, so for instance, what the hell was it? Was it a question about, um, it might have been about marijuana shops. It might have been about something else. I'm not, so don't quote me on that one, but the governor kind of dismissed, he didn't dismiss the question or the reporter, but he kind of dismissed the idea that access to recreational cannabis mattered anywhere near as much as the other issues that we're dealing with right now. So there's that kind of an attitude sometimes coming out of the answers. So no, I'm not going to ask him what could be, a less serious question or something on a topic that is way, way, way down, something like that. To kind of, there's so many coronavirus questions to ask that it would be nice to get his input on, say, something like the ballot access story, the signature deadline and the number of signatures that candidates need to come up with in order to get onto the ballot in November. There's, some candidates are now suing the state because they haven't changed that law and you can't collect enough signatures. So they're saying they don't have ballot access anymore. I'd love to get the governor's input on that. And under normal circumstances, I'd say, hey, what do you think about this? And that's certainly in the purview of a normal state house availability conversation. But, unless I'm done with coronavirus questions, I'm not going to get to a story that it would be nice to have his input on. He's not a principal in that. It's more of a legislative story. That's a question for Karen Spilka and Bob DeLeo, not necessarily Charlie Baker. So, that's one where it was like, okay, that in the back of my head, it'd be nice to have him, but like, I'm not going to waste everyone's time asking that question.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's too much news already.
Yeah. Yeah. So the threshold of what is important
Okay. That makes sense.
In those press conferences is far higher and far more on topic.
This is a little bit of a broader question, and you may have already answered it with another question. What would you say has been the biggest challenge for you, in the last few weeks?
Just mobility, I think, getting in and out of there, even though everyone at the State House has been really good, and as far as security and the Rangers keeping the doors open and everything has been very good. Just the onslaught of it all, it's a constant thing, not being able to really turn it off and going for, so I guess the challenge has been the concerns about personal health and hygiene. Well, hygiene's fine, but personal health and risk. And the professional challenge has been just kind of keeping your head above the water and getting these stories out, getting it out in an orderly manner.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, which is, news coverage. It's called reporting. It's a challenge.
Have you had trouble sort of differentiating your personal life and your professional life right now? And you're still on the field, but
yeah, no, I have professional Zoom backgrounds like this and fun pizza-shaped Zoom backgrounds for social Zoom. So that's really the extent of it. Not really. It's been pretty nonstop, and the fact that you don't really have too much social interaction going on anyway hasn't been that big a deal. It would be nice to get out and do some more things, but there's a lot of overlap between my professional and personal lives anyway. So this I'm probably in better shape to do this kind of dedicated mode, I guess is the best way to put it. So that I haven't been driven crazy yet.
Okay. I think that's all my questions for you.
Okay.
And so far I haven't gotten any more questions directly to me. Let me see if there's anyone else out there. Take one quick look. If anyone else has seen them who has my phone number, you can feel free to text them over to me. It's a limited number of people. Here we go. Oh, do you have any advice that you'd like to give us right now as we will figure out how to do journalism in a time of corona?
It's gonna sound kind of stupid, but I think right now we just have to do our job as efficiently as possible. Get that news into the paper, onto the web, on the air, and then move on to the next thing, because this is moving faster than we can handle it. So my advice would just really be put your nose down and write your stories, write your scripts, be as prepared as you can to pre-write certain scenarios. You know that there's going to be X new cases. You know what it means. Line up your sources for reaction to things like that. There's a lot of preparation that can be done, because this kind of has come into a daily routine, especially because of these press conferences and because of these DPH numbers of cases. You're going to have a press conference between 1 and 3:30 p.m. and you're going to have DPH numbers, between
Or
between 4-ish and 6-ish, but you can kind of set your clocks to that and know when you're delivering dailies, what that's going to be like. So I would kind of say get ahead and get your arms around that routine, and you can probably then be in a better place to do the real work. Like I said, keep in mind the stories you want to pursue later on. Keep in mind where things maybe aren't that transparent, where they aren't answering your questions. And then when this is said and done, the dust has settled a little bit more, we can see if these elected officials did a good job or not.
makes sense. Do you think journalism is more important right now, or is that becoming more clear at least?
Oh yeah, I mean, we're in a crisis. Of course it is. I think whether or not that shows up in page views and subscriptions and advertising dollars and pledge drive donation, you know, as far the business side of things, I do not know. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of an easy one. Of course, journalism is more important now.
Yeah.
It would be weird if I thought otherwise.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's all we have for you right now, and I really appreciate you carving
No,
out an hour.
I'm happy to do it.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you so
everybody.
much. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, listen to the radio, please.
Well, thank you again, and take care and stay healthy.
Thanks, I will. Thank you. Goes you too.
Bye.